If there's one book you need to read about birth, it's this one. Ina May's Guide to Childbirth is the Bible. It's amazing. This book fundamentally changed how I view birth, and now I'm actually excited for it. This video is for you if you don't have time to read a book, if you're close to your due date, or maybe you've already read this and you just want a quick summary. My name is Emma. I'm currently 27 weeks pregnant and I'm a prenatal yoga teacher. This channel is all about empowering women through all various cycles of our lives, and at the moment I'm currently focused quite a lot on pregnancy. If yoga and pregnancy and all that stuff sounds exciting, then please do subscribe to the channel. What am I going to go through in this video? First of all, I'm going to tell you what I thought of the book very briefly. Then I'm going to explain who Ina May is. And finally, I'm going to summarize the book. I'm not going to summarize or talk about the first half of the book, which is all the positive birth stories and first-hand accounts of amazing women who've gone through birth. The second half, the meat and potatoes, is all the practical goodies, and I'm going to go through these in order from pregnancy through labor, through birth, and to postpartum. First off, what did I think of the book? This is one of the first books that I read back in my first trimester, and it completely changed how I thought about birth. After reading this book, I was excited about giving birth, and I feel like my body is made for this, which is a huge transformation after all the negative media and negative stories we get from the world. This book has had a huge impact on how I've planned my birth. I've now got a doula, I changed doctors and hospitals, I've done a hypnobirthing course, I'm listening to those tracks almost daily. A lot of the principles in this book have really come into play on how I've planned my birth. Who is Ina May? Ina May is the mother of authentic midwifery, and she has an amazing birth center called The Farm, which has documented over 2,800 births with a 1.7% cesarean rate, which is phenomenal. In the US at the time, the cesarean rate was around 30%. Before publishing this book, Ina May also published Spiritual Midwifery, which I am going to read soon. And she's famous for having a more spiritual, natural mindset around birth. Pregnancy. So chances are you're pregnant right now watching this video. Ina May has a few things to say about pregnancy itself. First of all, depending on where you live, there are different systems. So I live in Dubai, UAE. It's very much a medical system here. It's led by obstetricians. Whereas if you live in the Netherlands, you have a midwife-led system. And you might live in a country where you have a choice whether you want to go down midwifery-led care or obstetrician-led care. As you can imagine, being a midwife, Ina May highly recommends going down the midwife route. There are less interventions, more positive birth experiences, so she highly advocates going for the midwife way if you can. Next up, she talks about nutrition. So nutrition is very important during pregnancy. It can reduce gestational diabetes, but not spoken about even now is preeclampsia. So even today, doctors will say it's very random, happens, we don't know why it happens. But Ina May believes it is diet related, and she points to a study by Tom Brewer. He took a group of women who lived in a geographical area that had a very high incidence of preeclampsia. It was around 20 to 35% of these women getting this condition. He gave them nutritional counseling and he managed to lower that rate to 0.5%, which is outstanding. So make sure your nutrition is good. Also, make sure you are doing exercise. Ina May talks about making sure you're doing walking, you're taking the stairs, dancing with swaying hips is fantastic, and she's a huge advocate of squatting. In the book, she says up to 600 squats a day would be a good idea. I don't know if my physiotherapist would agree with a statement like that, but if you take anything away, start squatting if you're not already doing some squats. She also talks about getting your baby in the right position before birth. So this is 3rd trimester, you want to start thinking about this. And she doesn't talk so much about breech actually, she talks about occiput posterior babies. These are babies who have their head down, but their spine is up against your spine rather than along your belly. And what we want is, we want the baby's spine to be up against the belly. It's easier for the baby to be born. And the best positions for this is if we're leaning forwards. We want to lean forwards rather than slouching back in sofas. And she talks about making sure we go in these positions, but actually a hypnobirthing teacher explained it really well to me, Sophie Fletcher. So if this is your tummy, bear with me, and this is the baby's spine, okay? So let's imagine the baby has their spine up against your spine. If we lean forwards, it's not so smooth, it starts to come forwards to the front. If we lean back, the spoon comes again round to the back. So we want to be thinking of the baby like this and leaning forwards. So if you're watching TV, Ina May recommends leaning over a beanbag or something to watch TV rather than slouching back in the sofa. And even I've heard that while you're sleeping, try and position yourself on your side so that your belly points down rather than points up. This will also help. She does also talk about prenatal testing, but I would really recommend checking out my video review on Expecting Better by Emily Oster for testing, as I feel it's more up to date and based in numbers and science. But she does go into that briefly. And finally, if you have had a cesarean before and you want to have a VBAC, so a vaginal birth after cesarean, first of all, it's best to wait up to 18 months if possible to get pregnant again. This will allow your cesarean scar to heal properly. Because in the case that your placenta has grown over the top of that scar and it's not healed properly, you can get different placental conditions, which mean it won't be possible for you to attempt vaginal delivery. In the case your placenta has grown in a completely different place and everything's fine, then you can go for a VBAC, but Ina May recommends that you avoid getting induced or having your labor augmented, as this makes contractions more intense and puts more strain on that scar. She also recommends minimal cervical checks. In the book, Ina May has a great set of questions you can ask your obstetrician or doctor about the birth. I'm going to read them off my phone, but they're really helpful and practical. First of all, how likely is it that you'll be there for the birth? How many women give birth without medication? What's your opinion of doulas? Can I be intermittently monitored? We'll talk more about that. Do you do episiotomies regularly? Can I eat and drink during labor? What is your personal C-section rate? Do you have a time limit for labor? Can I have skin to skin after birth? And I'm actually going to make an addition of my own here, which is, do you routinely induce And if not, at what point will you start recommending that I get an induction? So I think that's a question that I would add because that's been helpful in my journey. Because I asked my doctor and she said, all doctors in Dubai induce at 39 weeks, which isn't true. So I changed doctors. Next, she talks about what happens in labor. So a basic summary to sort of get us started. First of all, your cervix starts to soften and ripen, also called effacement. So this happens nice and early. It starts to soften so that it can dilate. Next, you have the first stage of labor. This is where your cervix starts to dilate. You have contractions, which help this dilation process. You move on to second stage labor, which is the pushing stage, where your body is contracting and pushing the baby down and through the cervix and down through the vagina. And finally, once the baby's born, you have the third stage, which is when you need to push out the placenta. Ina May talks about the huge variety in time that it takes for women to go through all these stages. And she even has stories of women where it's their first birth and they give birth within an hour. All of these stages in under an hour, which is kind of crazy. But this is very rare. And for first-time mothers, it can also take well beyond 20 hours and even days of labor. Next is my favorite section. This is Ina May's Secrets of Birth. I'm calling it Love, Stress, and Sphincters. Before we come on to that though, if you are enjoying this video, please give it a like, it means a lot, and subscribe to the channel. I am doing a lot of different book reviews and summaries because I'm reading a lot, and I have a ton of yoga videos for different stages in pregnancy, so do check those out. Ina May's Secrets to Childbirth, Love, Stress, and Sphincters. So we're going to start with sphincters. Lovely word. So we have different sphincters in our body. We're very used to the ones we use every day, which are our rectum and our bladder. The ones we're using in birth are our cervix and our vagina. And all these sphincters work in very similar ways. There are some things we can do that help them to open naturally, and there are some things that we can do which cause them to close very suddenly or that stop them from opening. They can't be commanded to open, and they're very instinctive and primal. So namely, there are two things that affect the way our sphincters behave, and they are governed by love and oxytocin. So oxytocin is the hormone of birth. It's also a hormone of love. And words I can associate here are privacy, calmness, dim lights, love, soft touch. All of these things are linked to oxytocin. And generally, this helps sphincters naturally to open and encourages them to stay open. On the other hand, we have stress, or cortisol, the hormone. Stress can cause sphincters to close very suddenly, or it can restrict them and stop them from opening and for things to progress naturally. If we look at just the vagina, for example, sex can be very pleasurable or very painful, depending on which hormones are involved. If it's an unconsensual situation, God forbid, then sex can be extremely painful. If it's a loving relationship and oxytocin is flowing, it can be extremely pleasurable. The same can be said for birth. So first, let's take a look at stress. The media and all these movies we've seen show us horrific scenes of childbirth. People screaming, in pain, terrified. This is great drama, unfortunately. And if they showed us beautiful imagery of a woman having a positive birth, it would not be as entertaining. So we have these stories already in our minds, and the irony is that if we believe these stories and we believe birth to be painful, we have more tension and fear within our bodies, and it's more likely to result in pain. The thing is, birth pain is different. It's not pain telling us to run or to fight. So it's not about fight or flight. It's about accepting and surrendering to something that is inherently natural. A lot of women try to escape this pain through medicated births, and which can result in different interventions and might result in more pain later on. If we surrender to this pain now, or these intense sensations, we can have very minimal recovery needed after birth. There's a fantastic story in the book where Ina May is attending a birth, and the woman kind of gets stuck at 5 centimeters dilated and just isn't progressing further. And she doesn't understand why. A friend comes in and says to Ina May, "Oh, has she told you about her mother?" And she kind of gets tingles. It's like, no, what is it? Well, she was adopted, and she has this strong belief that her mother died during childbirth. So she's holding on to this intense fear that she is also going to die during childbirth. Ina May discusses with her, and shortly after, she gives birth to her baby. This is just one example of how a fear can stop that progression, that natural opening of the sphincters. Another fantastic story in the book is a woman giving birth. She's actually crowning, the baby is coming out, and the obstetrician who's delivering the baby suddenly has a horrified look on his face, like absolutely horrified. And what had actually happened was it was a face presentation, and he didn't understand what he was seeing, so he thought there was something wrong with the baby. The mother saw his horrified face, and she sucked the baby back into her body with such force that she broke a rib. The baby hit one of her ribs and she broke a rib. All of her sphincters closed back again, and they had to start from scratch. Let's move on to love and oxytocin. So on the flip side of the media, it's actually true that many women have painless births, and also there are many women who experience orgasmic sensations during birth. Why do we never hear about that? If there's one thing I encourage you to do after this, it's to start educating yourself on positive birth stories. There are so many in this book, and that's a really valuable part of the book, but you can also find them on YouTube or reading blogs online or speaking to friends who you know had positive birth experiences. What can we do to increase oxytocin and help birth along its way? You can dim the lights and make it feel more homely. Focus on your deep breathing. You can get into warm water, a shower or a birthing tub. You can ask your loved ones to caress you, massage you, even sensual touch such as kissing can help. And inherently, oxytocin related to birth is also very sexual. If it's appropriate and you feel okay doing so, they can stimulate your nipples, which is a very effective way to increase oxytocin. And there's a great story in this book of a doctor saying, "I'm going to augment labor and give you Pitocin to speed things along because you're stalling." And she says, "I want to try something that I learned from Ina May's spiritual midwifery." He says, "Okay." He leaves the room, comes back in with a midwife, and this woman is topless. Her husband is sucking one nipple, and someone else, it doesn't specify in the book, this is the part I find a bit weird, someone else is sucking the other nipple. And yeah, the midwife almost faints, the doctor is a bit shocked, but it works. So if you want to do that, you can, or I don't know, there might be slightly more decent ways to do it than having two people sucking on your nipples, but if it works, it works. Another tip is to relax the jaw and the mouth and to make low pitched sounds. So the jaw relaxing has been associated and documented many times that it relaxes also the muscles in the cervix and vagina. So keep those jaw muscles relaxed. Laughter is also effective. You don't want your partner telling knock-knock jokes when you're in the middle of a contraction, but in the right moments and places, laughter can be very effective. Ina May talks about in a very intense contraction, she sees the fear come onto a woman's face and she will say, "Don't worry, I've never seen a woman explode or rip in half." And usually that lightens the mood and they kind of smile and the pain dulls. And the last technique we talk about in this video is visualization. So in one story, Ina May is checking a lady's dilation. She has her fingers on the cervix and she can feel that that lady is, let's say, I can't remember, but 6 centimeters dilated. As she's checking, the lady says, "I just want to open up and let this baby out." And she feels her cervix dilate an extra 2 centimeters underneath her fingers with those words. Visualizing that your cervix is opening like a flower. These sorts of visualizations, or just telling yourself, "I'm going to open, I'm going to get big," and seeing that can really help. And also allowing your primal instincts to take over rather than your rational brain. Another visualization that Ina May suggests is to imagine that you are a mammal of your choice. You can be a horse, you can be a dog, you can be a rabbit, and just letting your raw instincts take over. Finally, Ina May says, please start believing that your body is capable. So many women believe that they are a badly designed machine because of doctors saying things like, your hips aren't big enough to birth your baby, or your uterus isn't strong enough. These things make us believe that we're badly made. You're not badly made. You're perfectly built to do this job. If you've had issues with body negativity in the past, please let them go and start to give yourself positive affirmations around your body. Now we're going to look at going into labor. So first of all, it might be that you don't even have anything going on and it's suggested to you that you have an induction. So this book is quite anti-induction, and that definitely affected my views on getting induced. It causes more painful contractions. Your body hasn't prepared itself for the stress of labor. So in getting induced, it can be very intense and it can cause stress to both mother and to the baby. The baby can end up getting deprived of oxygen during the process. Also, if you do have a Pitocin induction where it's being delivered through a drip, it makes your mobility a bit more difficult as well. And it's more likely to result in an epidural to manage the more intense pain. And then you have what's called the cascade of interventions. I'm going to do another video about this cascade of interventions and about induction, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on this today. There are also many different types of induction. So there's different stages and different techniques they can use. The most extreme one being Pitocin. There are natural ways to induce. There's many old wives' tales like eating dates and things like that. But what she mentions in the book are sex, because semen has a very high dose of prostaglandins, which can initiate labor. And she also talks about nipple stimulation, which we mentioned before. So that can also bring labor on. So now let's just come to, you haven't needed an induction and you start to feel contractions happening and you're going into labor. The big question is, when do you go in? First of all, you're not waiting for your waters to break. That can happen at any time during the birth, and it can even not happen at all. Babies have been born inside the amniotic sac, which blows my mind. So when do you go in? Ina May says if you feel a contraction starting, run yourself a bath and have a glass of wine. Have a nap, sleep, because this can take a long time and you want to conserve your energy. She also talks about an Amish tradition that once you start getting contractions, they start a huge cooking project or something so that you stay on your feet. There are two lines of thought. One is you want to conserve your energy as much as possible so that you have more energy for labor. Secondly is to stay on your feet because you move around naturally in a way that allows your baby to get into the right position. So you want to either be napping or moving around, swaying your hips, staying on your feet, but don't overexert yourself. Do not go into the hospital right away. So if you go into the hospital straight away, they may then push for you to have an induction if your labor isn't progressing or if they have like a time limit on labor, which some hospitals do. So try to stay home as long as you possibly can. What my doula said to me, which I thought was some good advice, is if you are struggling to speak to somebody through a contraction, it's becoming that intense and painful, go into the hospital. Or if your contractions are becoming much more regular with around 3 minutes of break between them, that's also indication that you should go in. This is not fact or law, it's just the advice that I was given. So you're in the hospital or the birthing center or your midwives have come to your home birth, what now? First of all, Ina May recommends intermittent monitoring over continuous monitoring. Continuous monitoring means that you need to lie still in a bed and you're not able to move around and jostle the baby into the best position. Intermittent has been shown to be just as effective at combating neonatal mortality. Next, make sure you can eat and drink during labor. So this is something you can check beforehand, and then make sure you bring some hydrating drinks full of electrolytes and some small, easy to digest snacks. Often doctors can push for augmentation or a C-section because of failure to progress, that your labor essentially stalls. And if it's because you haven't been eating, often this is simply that you've run out of energy. Make sure that in your birth plan, you have thought about cervical examinations, cervical checks, because different hospitals may have different policies. A lot of them want to check you when you first come in, but then after that, they probably are, or they may be optional if you request that you don't want any cervical checks. Having a cervical check, if it's done roughly, it can cause the cervix to close slightly, or it can delay or slow down the progression. And also, you might think you're further along and then hear that you haven't progressed or you've not dilated so much, and this could disappoint you. So just have a think about if you want these checks or not. Next, we come on to birthing positions. So Ina May recommends either upright positions or on all fours. So upright positions are standing, swaying your hips. You could be holding onto a rope or something above you. You can hold your partner, or you might be on all fours, hands and knees. You can be in like a lunge position. All of these positions are fantastic for birth. Do bear in mind that if you have an epidural, this will affect your mobility and you won't be able to do these positions. One important note, if you have an epidural, if you lie on your side rather than your back, this is a much better position in order to birth in because your pelvic bone isn't in the way. Not mentioned in the book, but just a little fun fact. On the mention of epidural, let's talk about pain relief. So Ina May talks about tranquilizers and does not recommend them for birth as they can affect the baby. You've got narcotics, which can provide a little bit of pain relief, but it's mostly a relaxant and can cause you to be drowsy and sleepy. It's not good to have these just before the birth, if the birth is imminent or if you're at the pushing stage, because that can then affect the baby. So better to have that earlier on than the pushing stage. You also have gas and air. This is very popular because it's very short-lived. You take a breath and you feel the effects. It's kind of a relaxant, reduces anxiety. But if you're not enjoying it, or you have a little bit of nausea, which can happen, the effects also wear off very, very quickly. And finally, you have the epidural. Epidural is very effective pain relief if it works at full effect, but it can come with a lot of different negatives. Even when it's working perfectly, it means that you're going to need to lie on your back or your side, and you can't move as effectively. The baby can't get into as optimum a position, and this can then lead to an assisted delivery, more tearing, and it's essentially this cascade of intervention. I'll do a whole video on that in the future. If it doesn't go well, you can get a very severe headache. It can work just on one side of the body and not the other. So Ina May isn't a big proponent of the epidural, but in the case that a woman is laboring for a long time, she's exhausted, she can't handle it anymore, it may be that having an epidural is the last thing that you can do in order to have a vaginal birth. So if that's the case, then an epidural might be better than moving straight onto a C-section. This leads us on nicely to when do you need a C-section? There will be some scenarios where you might need to have a cesarean, and it's hard to know. I'm going to read off a list here because I don't want to miss anything. So a ruptured uterus, this is very rare but very serious. You have placental conditions such as placenta previa, accreta, increta, percreta, or placental abruption, so issues with the placenta. Cord prolapse, where the cord goes before the baby. And you've got different presentations, so frank breech, so a type of breech where the bum is first instead of the head. You have brow or face presentation, when instead of the top of the head, the baby is looking this way. And you have transverse lie, where the baby is basically horizontal instead of vertical, so it's lying like it's laying on a sofa on the side. Then you've got maternal distress, so convulsions, elevated heart rate, things like this, or fetal distress, where the heart rate gets lower than 120 beats per minute with meconium as well. There are many other possible reasons for C-section, but these ones are like, you need a C-section. But do a lot of research on that for your birth plan. Next we have the second stage of labor, pushing the baby out. First of all, your pelvis is built to give birth to your baby. Back in the day, some women had deficiencies which caused rickets, and that disease causes a misshapen pelvis. This is where the term, I've forgotten what it's actually called, I'll put it on the screen, comes from, that the baby can't fit through the pelvis. It comes from back when women had rickets. Women really don't have rickets anymore. It's a very rare condition. Your pelvis is fine, so just believe that. It's important to note that between pushes, the baby's head may come back up a little bit. That's completely normal. You are still making progress. One fear a lot of women have is around tearing. Tearing does not need to happen, and your body is capable of opening up in incredible ways. There's an amazing story in the book where Ina May is delivering a baby, and as the baby is coming out, she sees the woman's vagina open up to a huge size, like bigger than needed. And she asked the lady afterwards, like, how did you do that? That was amazing. And she said, I just told myself, I'm gonna get really big, I'm gonna get really big. And she did. Again, that visualization technique. And one thing let's look at men's bodies. Their penises can expand massively in size. Our bodies are capable of the same sort of expansion. We just don't see it on a everyday basis or common basis. So we need to believe that our bodies are built to do this. Things that can help to reduce tearing are, again, keeping your jaw and mouth loose and relaxed and making low-pitched sounds and moans. And also, interestingly, clitoral stimulation. So depending on where you're giving birth and how comfortable you would be doing that, women who stimulate their clitoris at this time also have a reduction in tearing because the tissues become swollen, engorged, and just all the good stuff, and they don't experience tearing. Importantly, there is no need for an episiotomy, or extremely rarely. It's only if the baby is in extreme distress and needs to come out immediately that an episiotomy should be performed. And it's kind of going out of style anyway, or so I've heard, that it's not as big a thing as it was when Ina May wrote this book. At Ina May's birthing center, The Farm, 68% of women who gave birth had completely intact perineums, like no tearing. So it's absolutely possible for you to have a birth where you do not tear, and if you do tear, that it's a minimal tear. So now, baby has been born, baby should be on your chest for skin to skin. It's time for the third stage, which is giving birth to the placenta. This usually happens within 30 minutes, and this can happen completely naturally without any injections, without someone pushing on your stomach or tugging on a cord. All that oxytocin that you're experiencing with having your baby on your chest stimulates the uterus to contract, the placenta to release and to be born. It can also help to be in an upright position to birth the placenta as well. It is common for women to bleed a after the placenta is birthed, and an oxytocin or Pitocin injection can help women not to hemorrhage. Things to be aware of after the birth and after third stage is deep vein thrombosis. If you find that you have pain in one or both of your legs, or you're limping, this should not be ignored. Do talk to your doctor about it. And you can also hemorrhage later on. In some cases, part of the placenta remains within the uterus, and this can cause issues. So if you're noticing like very heavy bleeding or pain or a very bad smell, then this is also something to report to the doctor. And we're on to the very last section, which is preparing for motherhood. In the US, 20 to 30% of mothers can experience postpartum depression. So planning ahead for postpartum should not be taken lightly. Make sure you have support in place. I would really recommend reading books like The First 40 Days to prepare yourself for that postpartum period. Make sure you prep ahead and freeze lots of meals, and you have help from family or paid help if you can during this time. Try to attend some antenatal classes before birth to make some friends at a similar stage to you. And if you have any friends who are mothers to newborns, see if you can get some practice sessions in to change diapers or even just hold a newborn baby, just so that you know what you're going to be dealing with. And that is it. I know this was a long video. Thank you for making it all the way here to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. I am also going to do a series on birth covering a bunch of different topics like induction, epidural, C-section. So do subscribe to the channel if you want to see more about birth. And yeah, I'm wishing you a happy, healthy pregnancy. Please do write in the comments where you are at in your pregnancy, how many weeks are you and how is it going? I would love to know. Wishing you a lovely day and see you in another video soon. Bye.